Hello from London. I want to give the world an update. As many of you know, I filed a 22-page petition against the state of Iowa to commence a lawsuit. One of the other defendants was Kim Reynolds for Iowa. That's the campaign committee of Governor Reynolds. So if you go to wildwillpower.org, you can read this document, and it's basically a 4-part petition explaining some political persecution I experienced back in 2006 and 2009 from some local officials. I uncovered some fraud involved with that case in November of 2022, and there is legal doctrine that basically it's for fraud cases, and it extends the limitations period. So the limitations period, instead of beginning 20 years ago, it begins on the date that you discover the fraud. So you can read about that in the lawsuit as well. So it's 4 parts. Part of it's what happened years ago. Part of it is what happened, some subsequent events, and some defamation by Governor Reynolds. Some of the defamation against transgender people in general happened while she was in office, and some of it happened while during her campaign for re-election. So there's something in law called unjust enrichment, and it's basically when a person gains a lot of money at the expense of somebody else. And so her campaign was largely lifted up through these defamatory statements she made against transgender people. And there's also been wholesale rights violations against trans people by the state of Iowa. Anyway, you can read that in your own time. Email me if you have questions. That's on wildwillpower.org. And underneath articles and cases, that menu. And it's sometimes easier to find these sections of the website on a desktop computer as opposed to a phone or mobile device. So there's 2 lawsuits. One is versus the state of Iowa, and the other one is against 2 local organizations in Ames, Iowa, where I live. One of them is a nonprofit called Reliable Street, and they share a building with a neighboring business, Lockwood Café. Now, typically in articles, when you write about this sort of thing, you don't use individual people's names. I don't think even though that's what's culturally acceptable, you would say like the president of Reliable Street instead of saying this person's actual name in the article. Or the employee, an employee said you don't typically use their names. So that's how I've written it. And that's what I've made public on the website. And I've redacted or crossed out names of people involved in order to hide their identity, which I have conflicting feelings about, because first off, these organizations appear to do what they can to be like LGBT friendly and ally spaces, like safe spaces. Customers, investors, and people who work there, if they saw the big picture on what actually happened, and I strongly encourage anybody to actually please look at the facts. I know it's not hard because this is very emotional, because it has to do with a space that a lot of people love and feel safe at and comfortable at and are grateful to have a welcoming space in Ames. But I think it's important for anybody that believes in justice or doesn't. A handful of people, a small clique of friends within those 2 organizations did something predatorial to me. And it wasn't predatorial yet. Initially, I filed a discrimination complaint against them because of after doing about 6 months of volunteer labor at Reliable Street, gardening, prairie restoration and volunteering at open mics, I was suddenly kicked off the property for, quote, violating a woman's space with no explanation given to me. And it later on, they told me, it was multiple people. But initially, that was the story I was told, that it was a person. And I asked what I did, and they wouldn't tell me. They wanted to protect the identity of the person who complained. And so I'm thinking, okay, so non-trans woman complains against trans woman violating space, no explanation given. I'm racking my brain for days trying to think about what I did. And anyway, eventually came to the conclusion I'm being gaslighted. Regardless, yes, I was volunteering for this nonprofit. I would not have wasted 20 hours a week for 6 weeks or 6 months doing manual labor for this organization if I knew they were going to kick me out in this manner. Like, I was helping with this garden and this managing this prairie restoration project as I was asked to do. And I was getting along really well with the students I was working at from Ames High School, and suddenly was kicked off the property with a vague explanation. So I filed a complaint, which I thought was a legitimate complaint, discrimination complaint, because non-trans woman complains, trans woman kicked out, no explanation given, preferential treatment given to one, and the violating a woman's space is very cliche and very political these days. Like, I felt like as allies of the community, quote unquote, they should provide something more than that. It was just vague. And maybe they didn't intend to discriminate, and I think I filed this complaint, and then they probably had a privilege moment of, maybe we did. But regardless, the way that they responded to the complaint was with several false allegations toward me. I got accused of stalking and harassing a woman, saying racist comments, saying I was going to pay for prairie seeds but never doing it, even though I have a receipt, and was going half and half with this employee. Anyway, I'm going to fast forward. You can read all about that also on the website. So there's 2 lawsuits. There's the Lockwood Reliable lawsuit, and I'm going to say there's one other person involved in the lawsuit that was like a friend of this clique of friends, and they're in their official filings, they're saying that they were a patron of the business, but this is a person who was provided a studio space by Reliable Street and also sells artwork or had artwork up and displayed on multiple occasions there. And so they were not merely a patron. So anyway, it's like Reliable Street, Lockwood, the president and vice president of Reliable Street, and 3 people from Lockwood. One is the owner. The owner may have been more caught in the middle, but I don't see her like speaking up right now. So maybe if she gets all the facts, she will come forward and say this isn't right and I was caught in the middle. I don't really know. But and then these 2 employees that said defamatory statements. I didn't know about most of this because when initially I had no clue who within those organizations was actually like attacking me or politically attacking me. Because the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, they don't actually send you the evidence that the adverse parties send them. So I just saw all this slander got said, but a lot of the Civil Rights Commission was like, their assessments of it were, the owner said that the employee said this. So they literally send you their assessment. They literally send you hearsay within their assessment. And so immediately I asked, can I get a copy of the file? And so I can review the evidence. And they said, no, we can't send that to you. You can request it after we close the case. But the Civil Rights Commission has this process where immediately when you have to request a letter for the right to sue. After they close a case, you have like up to two years to request a letter for the right to sue. Immediately when you request that letter at whatever time it is, you have 90 days to file. you cannot request a copy of the evidence until you request this letter of the right to sue. So I basically got all my ducks in a row, pulled together all the evidence I had, and with still some blank spaces, not really know what's going on, I filed a letter for the right to sue. I requested the letter for the right to sue late last year, immediately filed to request a copy of the evidence. They sent it to me 1 month later, so I waited about 30 days. And so from the time I received this evidence, I had 60 days to file in court. So I don't know how you're supposed to find an attorney. I've personally called more than 50 attorneys throughout the state. I have a list, and their responses, cheapest quote I got was $5,000 up front. They wanted $250 an hour. I obviously can't afford that. I've contacted every organization I could find throughout the state of Iowa. So far, when I say that, you name it, I've contacted them. I'm not going to go naming a bunch of names, but it appears that there's actually zero resources for helping afford legal assistance. And organizations like Iowa Legal Aid, Story County Legal Aid, Drake Law University Legal Aid, several others, they don't take fee-generating cases. They only do like tenant landlord and family law issues. And groups like Lavender Legal that are like, we help with legal assistance for transgender people. They do like name and gender changes, but this is too dicey or something. They don't fund it. And a lot of the funding for these legal aid organizations, I've been doing some research, comes from an organization called, I think it's called Legal Corporation. Can't remember the name offhand, but it's basically a federal organization that gives funding to legal aid organizations with the stipulation that they can't fund anything that's considered a fee-generating case. So I've contacted groups like Ames Pride and One Iowa. They don't help with, from what I got the response, they don't get involved with private legal matters. So they do more general advocacy and trainings and whatnot, but as far as like one-on-one assistance for situations like mine, I'm SOL. So I'm assuming I'm not the only one. Anyway, the reason I'm making this video, let me fast forward. So December 6th, I actually got this case filed in time. I untangled, and I'm going to show you how, I untangled the Iowa Rules of Procedure. There's 372 rules. There's legal terms throughout all of it. It's a crossword puzzle from hell. It appears to me that it's specifically designed so that common people and non-lawyers will not untangle this knot in time to file something themselves without an attorney. So I'm about to show you, I'm gonna share my screen with you, and I'm gonna show you how I untangled them, and how I'm going about filing motions as a non-attorney. Because I think for the political fights that are coming up, we need a lot more average Americans figuring out the legal system. Abraham Lincoln said the people are the rightful masters of the courts and Congress, not to overthrow the people who uphold the Constitution, but those who pervert it. And my question is, how are we the people the rightful masters of the courts when the courts themselves have been made so complex that the average person has an extremely difficult time even accessing them because they've been made overly complex? So so I filed the case in time against Reliable Street. I filed the case against the state of Iowa. Just before I left for London last month in February, I paid the Story County Sheriff's $180 so that they would serve the parties at Reliable Street in Lockwood who share the same address. So that means what I meant by serving them is you file the petition that commences the civil action. Then you end up you got to file an original notice. A common term for this is the summons. You're summoning the party saying a lawsuit's been filed against you. In Iowa, they happen to call that an original notice. Every state seems to have it a little bit different. That's a whole nother ball of carnauba wax. But so 2 days ago, I received notice that people from Lockwood and Reliable Street have responded. They found an attorney. The attorney appears to be related to one of the parties, the friend, not one of the employees or the officers of the nonprofit. They share the same last name, and it's a rare last name, so I'm assuming it's a relative that filed this case. Instead, so when I finally received the evidence, let me back up just a second. When I finally received the evidence from the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, more than a year after I filed the case, or the complaint, I saw that a fraudulent document was filed against me. Lockwood Café's owner sent it to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. My assumption is that the employee tampered with the document and handed it to her to give to them. I don't really know. We'll have to find out later. Whoever did it hasn't owned up yet. It's like we don't have enough issues from non-allies, and this is the shit we have to deal with from allies, so whatever. But anyway, they took my letter. I sent out a letter to my friends from the space when I was first kicked off the property and said, hey, I know we're friends. We see each other there regularly. So you know you're not going to see me there anymore. I was kicked off. I don't know why. I was accused of some really bad stuff. I don't know what this is about. But in case you hear anything really bad about me, I don't know what it's about. Feel free to reach out to me. Please, I consider us friends, but I won't be there. So this person, one of the employees who made the initial complaint about me, they seem to have, so they told me for the first time in response, they said, I complained about you. I've been feeling uncomfortable around you for a long time. I didn't say anything because I didn't feel comfortable talking to you about it. Maybe if I said something sooner, it'd be different, but it is what it is. And I'm like, and then they blocked me, so that was the end. What they sent to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission was they took my letter and they took a screenshot of my letter and they moved it after what she wrote. So it made it look to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission like she told me not to contact her again, and then I sent her all this. So, yes, it was a fabricated document. 2 days ago, I got notice that a motion was filed against me. And it was said stuff like, they want the whole case dismissed because they weren't served properly. And there's an Iowa court rule of civil procedure that says that they can be handed to anybody 18 years or older that's on the property, and it's sufficient as service. So the president who received the original notice from the officer, apparently this is part of their legal argument, is that none of the Lockwood people were served properly because you handed it to the president, and therefore this whole case should be thrown out. Now, I don't know if any of you have read the Justice Accessibility Act. This is part of my call for justice reform for the state of Iowa. You might know that I'm running for Iowa governor. And a big part of my justice reform plan is to simplify the justice system so it's easier for average citizens to access the courts. If these are our courts, let's make them accessible. 92% of low-income Americans don't have access to, can't find representation for civil matters. So let's make it more accessible. Which gets me into what I'm going to show you. But let me just finish the explanation on I personally believe that I would like the people who did me wrong, and they know what they did, to just own up, apologize, and settle. Come up with a settlement. Reimburse me for my 6 months of labor. Like, reimburse me for some of the emotional suffering and the hours upon hours upon hours I've had to do on this lawsuit in order to save my reputation from horrible allegations. I live with a dark cloud above my head right now of like, ooh, did Sandra really stalk this woman? Like, and with all of the allegations about transgender women right now, like, that's a pretty big dark cloud to be walking around town with. Like, there's reasons haven't been going out, or you haven't seen me as much around Ames, because I don't feel safe with what these people have done, and I feel like my reputation is severely tarnished, because Reliable Street is supposed to support local artists. I feel like, and they seem to be intertwined with about the entire art scene in Ames. So, as an artist, as a singer-songwriter, I do other stuff as well. I've felt very pushed out of the Ames art scene ever since this happened, and I want to get this settled, straightened down. I want the record set straight, and I want reimbursed for my suffering. I want some restitution for this, and I want the record to set straight and to know who did the predatorial actions. Like, and I think that these people owe it to the community. I would like to see the president and vice president of Reliable Street step down. And I think if people knew their names and actually look at what they did, more people would say, yes, they should step down. That is not okay for a nonprofit to advertise themselves as LGBT friendly and then have a few people within it treat somebody, trans woman behind the scenes, in the manner that I've been treated. I would like the 2 employees fired. Sending in a fraudulent document about me, and like, people go there investing in in 2 organizations that are LGBT friendly. Now's your time. You have to, like, prove that you're actually LGBT friendly, or right now, to me, you look like it's performative activism. There's probably some shame involved, and there should be. Anyway, how is a non-lawyer? Let me show you. So here is the Iowa Rules of Civil Procedure. There are, I think it's 302 rules. These are the list of rules here. And then, yeah, there's a lot of rules. a lot of rules. And then it gets down into the actual rules. So 302 of these guys, and you'll see some of them get longer. Some will just go on. There's like one rule that'll just go on for several pages. So needless to say, there's no hyperlinks. It's all just a long list, and you can see from the, I don't know if it'll pick up on the camera here. Oh, yeah. You can see from that bar here, it's still going to go down for a very long time. All these rules. So I'm showing you right now the complexity of the Iowa Rules of Civil Procedure. Now, so those govern the rules of civil cases, which is what this is. This is not a criminal case. A criminal case would be like if you got a ticket from a police officer or arrested by a police officer. Then there's the rules of evidence. These apply to both civil and criminal cases. There are 72 or so, 60-something rules. I can't remember, but if you add them all up, civil rules and these apply to both types, criminal and civil cases. And there's enough. So in order to take a case, you got to learn all of these civil rules of procedure and all of these rules of evidence. And the motion that was filed against me on behalf of the parties I filed against. Most of it's all like, this rule says this and this rule says this, and Sandra didn't follow the rules perfectly, so this case should be thrown out. So I think it's just stupid. I think it's just honestly, if you did something wrong, you did something wrong. Make it right. But don't like try to deny a lower class person from justice by having the case thrown out from rule technicalities. Own up. So this case, or this website, reunitethestates.org, here's part of how I'm filing this myself. This is a website I began building, I believe, back in 2011 or 2012. You have all sorts of sections. I've literally transcribed thousands of legal term definitions onto this website. There's even a section and I've not only categorized them and hyperlinked them to each other. I've used multiple sources so that it doesn't, this section's just on government accountability. I've used multiple sources throughout it so that it complies with what are called fair use laws. So we have a First Amendment right to broadcast information that's pertinent for our fellow citizens that fellow citizens need, and copyrighted material can be used for First Amendment for legitimate First Amendment purposes. You got to cite your sources, and to help spread knowledge about how our legal system is theoretically supposed to work versus how it is working. I've compiled this resource and made it public to everybody. So as I learn the justice system, everybody else can learn it with me. So here's color of law crimes, color of office. All these are transcribed from law dictionaries that are recommended on the U.S. Court of Federal Claims website. That's one of the federal courts in this country is the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. Every courthouse throughout the U.S. has a pro se section on their website. So pro se means like on your own behalf. It's short for propria persona. So if you can't afford or find an attorney, so you'll see we had some definitions, and then you have all these sub definitions. So here's a type of arrest called a malicious arrest. Here's like the definition for what is probable cause, what is not probable cause. So this took me years of transcribing legal terms throughout this website. So that's one of the resources that helped me. So when I'm actually reading the rules of procedure, I know what some of these complex words are. If you go to the website, reunitethestates.org, you can also begin to learn these things. Here's also what I've done. So I've gone into Google Docs, and I've got the Iowa Rules of Procedure simplified. And here's the rules of evidence I showed you, and here's the rules of procedure. Now, these are not finished. This is what I'm currently working on. Like I said, 372 rules, and they're not straightforward. It's a crossword. I'm going to get back to this in a second. It's a crossword puzzle from hell. There's things like, and I'm not sure the exact number, but there's rules like rule number 95 says that like if the plaintiff didn't do this step when they initially filed their petition, it's too late and they can't. So rules like that I went through every single rule and went through every single rule and categorized them into, does this rule apply to pre-trial, before the trial starts? Does it apply during trial? Or is it apply during judgment and post-trial? There's also assorted rules not included in the general instructions. Like these are basically like a section of rules where you might read through them once. And let's see. Assorted rules not included. I'll just show you what some of it looks like. Other rules not hugely important. So rule applicability these are just general. The rules in this chapter shall govern the practice and procedure in all courts of the state except where they expressly provide otherwise or statutes. Computing time, holidays, effects of notice. So these are the types of rules where you might just look through them once and then maybe go back and find it again, but they're probably like, if it doesn't, look through them once. If it doesn't apply to your case, don't worry about them probably. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just saying what I have found to be useful based on one private citizen's research. Pretrial. So I've got these rules categorized into step 1, plaintiff commences a civil action by filing a petition with the court. Step 2, plaintiff had 90 days to serve original notice, which I told you about. Defendant has 20 days to respond. Step 4, court sets a trial-setting conference. Step 5, court schedules a pretrial conference to prepare. Step 6, discover and disclosure. So we've just finished with the reliable Lockwood case. Defendant has 20 days to respond. With the state of Iowa one, when I get back to Iowa is when I'll serve original notice to the Attorney General's office and Department of Management. So I should mention, okay, so let's see. Files a civil action by filing a case. How to demand a jury trial. How to format the petition. How to request non-monetary forms of relief. So if I don't just want money, I want this to be made right so it doesn't hurt somebody else. That's called an injunction. You can read about that. Step 1, file a petition. Special cases or peculiar circumstances is a folder, so you can look through that one time, and if it applies to your case, you might want to. Commencing a civil action. So here's all the rules that have to do with basically step 1. And so I've tried to put them at least all in one spot so that you can quickly figure that out. And this is a work in progress. Use it all at your own risk. I am not legally... I'm not to be held liable if you try using these and it doesn't work. That's all in the read this first section. So read this first, read that section first. You are not going to sue me if you try to use this and it doesn't work. Like, I'm doing my best, but I am not a professional. I'm just a private citizen that's like, this is horrible. So here is page 1 from the motion that they just filed against me, saying, throw out this case. We weren't served properly, even though they were, and now but maybe they don't expect me to know this other rule that applies. Like, they're saying, this rule wasn't served properly. Throw out the case to the judge. I'm going to point out some other rules. Maybe they didn't expect me to have gone to all this length. That shows that they were in fact served properly. And one of the things in my responses is going to be, it's a motion to recuse. So I'm going to be filing this motion. Judge, what's her name? I think it's like Gronwall or something. The judge that was appointed to my case against the state and to this case was appointed by Kim Reynolds, who's a defendant in one of the cases. So there's an Iowa Code of Judicial Conduct which says that if there's any reason that a party might have, and I'm not reading it verbatim, but if there's any reason any involved party might have any reason to suspect you have bias, you have to recuse yourself. So I'm filing a motion to recuse, and then I'm filing a motion to continue. That means, so first, before you even rule on this other parts of this motion, you need to step down. I need a judge that was not appointed by Kim Reynolds. She's been not good to... she's made her sentiment toward transgender people known when she's violated the rights of trans people and publicly defamed. Anyway, it's in the lawsuit. You can read about it. So it's a motion to recuse, motion to continue, that basically